Hello, I'm Diane, and today I want to talk about all of the books that I read in February. This really isn't going to take that long. I only finished 2 books in February, and then I have a third book to talk about that I started but ended up not finishing because I just wasn't enjoying it. I also am going to talk about what I'm planning to read this month. I didn't really make a TBR at the beginning of the month, so while these are books that I'm planning to read, I guess this is my TBR, but it's not really complete of everything that I want to read this month. It's just what I know in this moment I'm probably going to read, or at least try to read this month. So let's start with the wrap up. Let's start with the book that I didn't finish, and then we'll work our way into something more positive. The book I didn't finish is Paradise 1 by David Wellington. This is a sci-fi thriller. It's the first book in a series, and I was really anticipating this. I really enjoy sci-fi thrillers. This one sounded really interesting, the premise, but I read almost 100 pages of it. This book's almost 700 pages long, so it's not a short book by any means. And at almost 100 pages in, I really just didn't care about anything that was happening. So I decided to give up. It really put me in a bit of a slump. I really slowed down my pace because of this one. I just didn't love the writing. We start off with our main characters, which there's 3 humans who are going to be a crew on this ship together. They kind of just show up at the ship after we've met them, and they go into cryosleep pretty much straight away. There's an AI that's running the ship, as is pretty common in sci-fi. And then there's this other, I think it's an AI that is elsewhere, but it 3D prints itself a body after the humans go into cryosleep. It's really weird. And then all of a sudden we skip ahead to them waking up from their cryosleep, and the ship has been breached, and they're in immediate danger of their lives, and they have no idea what's going on. And it just felt like there was so much action, but I didn't have time to care about the characters. I wasn't really into the writing style, and there was just so much action, but it felt like nothing was really happening, and it was just feeling a bit like a chore to read, which is not what I want out of my books. So I figured I'd quit while I was ahead. I had really been looking forward to this book though, so that was pretty disappointing. But the other 2 books that I read last month I did really enjoy. The first one is The Butcher of the Forest by Primi Mohammed. This is a dark fairy tale style story. We follow a woman called Varys, who is the only person who's ever gone into this magical forest and come back. So when the tyrant's children, the tyrant who rules the land, his 2 children go missing in this forest, he forces her to go into the forest after them and retrieve them. And if she doesn't, he's going to harm her family and the people of her village. So she really has no other option. So she goes into this forest, and it's very strange, very magical, very creepy. The forest kind of changes and wants to keep her within it. There are creatures within the forest that want to trick her as a means to keep her within it. And she knows she really only has a day before it's too late, before she herself isn't going to be able to leave the forest. So we go on this journey with her as she searches for these 2 children and hopes to find them and make it out alive somehow. There is obviously magic. She has some magical items herself that are helping her. It's a pretty quick read. It's under 200 pages, so it's a fairly short story. And I really enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun with it. I like this type of story. I've been more recently getting into the magical forest setting, and I've found some really cool stories that way, and this was another one that I really enjoyed. I recommend it. It's a pretty short read if you like that dark fairy tale feeling story. It's a little bit nonsensical feeling at times with the magic, but there are rules that we kind of figure out. Not a lot's explained up front other than that this is a forest that nobody in the area goes in because they know better, but I felt like enough was explained. And I also liked that the ending felt like this particular story had wrapped up, but it also felt like it was pretty open-ended, like there could definitely be more. There's definitely something that comes next, and you can kind of imagine that on your own. I don't know if we'll get a follow-up to see that story, but I think it's really cool to feel like we got a complete story, but it's not the end. Not everything is neatly tied up, and there's definitely the potential for there to be more. I know not everyone likes open-ended things in stories, but I personally think it's really cool when an author can make the story feel like it concluded in a satisfying way while also leaving that there's definitely something that would come next. And the other book I finished is The Truth of the Eleke by Moses Osiotomi, which is the sequel to The Lies of the Ajungo. I loved The Lies of the Ajungo, so I was very eager to get into the sequel, and I very much enjoyed this. It's a similar type of story. We follow a teenage boy who lives in a city in the desert. They're very isolated. He only knows what the city has taught him about the city and the world, and he goes out into the desert. He is sent after an attack on their city to go and train and learn about these other people that they're up against. And he ends up learning some difficult truths about the world, that maybe things aren't the way that he always thought that they were. And we go along this journey of him figuring out the different sides of what's happening in his world and figuring out his place within that, which side he wants to support, and how his role in everything that's going on could affect the bigger picture. I really enjoyed this author's writing so far. I think this world is really cool, even though it is very small and pretty isolated. It is a desert. The cities are very far apart, so we're pretty much isolated to the city that we're in with the one character that we're following, but I think the stories within this world have been really cool and really engaging, and I'm having a lot of fun reading them. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing where everything goes next. So that's another one I definitely recommend. I did do full reviews for both of those books, The Butcher of the Forest and The Truth of the Eleke. I'll link those if you're interested in hearing a little bit more in depth my thoughts about those, but otherwise, let's get into what I'm reading in March. So right now I'm reading A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller, and I'm probably not gonna finish it. I'm honestly just really bored with it. It's set in like a post-apocalyptic world, and the monks in this world are the keepers of knowledge, basically. They collect as much knowledge and information that they can find from whatever remains, and they keep it and they pass it down through their generations. So a lot of it doesn't mean anything to them. They don't understand a lot of it. They just keep it and maintain it, and we follow one of these monks as he uncovers something that they assume is important, and he thinks he found the bunker for St. Leibowitz. I still don't really understand why St. Leibowitz is so important to these people. I'm a little over a third of the way into the story, and I haven't felt invested this whole time, so I feel like I should probably just give up, but I feel like I'm just waiting for something to happen, something interesting, and I don't know if we're gonna get there. I don't know if it's gonna be interesting for me at any point. But I started reading this because last year I decided I wanted to read a bunch of award-winning books, because awards aren't really something I've ever paid too much attention to. They don't really hold much weight in me deciding what I want to read, but I think it's very interesting what makes an award-winning book and why a book might win a particular award. So I wanted to read a bunch of award-winning books from a few different awards and see if any of them really align with my personal reading taste. So far it hasn't been great. There have been some interesting stories so far, but I don't think that these are ultimately going to hold any weight in my reading once I'm done with this. So this is one of those books, but I have a handful of others to read in March. The first of which is Ringworld by Larry Niven. I also have Where Sweet the Late Birds Sang by Kate Wilhelm, Stand on Zanzibar by John Brunner, and The Gods Themselves by Isaac Asimov. I really don't know anything about any of these. I haven't been looking into the synopses. I'm just reading from a list that I made. The only one I'm really looking forward to is The Gods Themselves, because I used to read Isaac Asimov when I was, I think, in high school. When I was a teenager, I read a bunch of Isaac Asimov, and I don't really remember the stories particularly, but I do remember that I very much enjoyed them, so hopefully I still enjoy them. And outside of these award-winning books, I'm also reading Prince of Fools by Mark Lawrence. This is the first book in the Red Queen's War trilogy. which takes place in the same world as the Broken Empire trilogy, which I've already read and enjoyed. I don't really know much about the plot of this. Again, I don't read too much into the plots of things before I pick them up. I kind of read the synopsis and then say that sounds interesting, put it on my list until I get to it, and by then I've probably forgotten most of the details, and this was one of them. I'm sure I'll like it because so far I've liked everything I've read by Mark Lawrence, but we'll see. And I'm also reading The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. I started this months ago. I'm about a third of the way through it, and I was enjoying it, but I set it down to prioritize some other things. I just never picked it back up, so I'm hopefully finally gonna actually finish it this month. I am enjoying it. I'm not sure at this point if I'm gonna read the rest of the series. I guess we'll see how the rest of the book plays out, but I'm enjoying it so far. I think the world's interesting. The magic is kind of weird and interesting, but we'll see how it goes. Hopefully I finally finish it. I'm also planning to read The Darkness Before Them by Matthew Ward. This is a book that came out last November, and I've had a copy of it for that entire time, and I just haven't made time for it. So that's another first book in a fantasy series. I don't remember exactly what it's about. I think it's about a thief who has to steal something important, and that's really all I remember about the synopsis. But I was very much looking forward to it. It sounds like something I would really like, so hopefully I finally get to that book. This month's about me trying to finally finish things that I've started a while ago, and also these really old award-winning books. Those are my plans for the month. Let me know if you read anything good in February, if you're planning to read anything you're really excited about in March. Otherwise, that's all for me today. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Bye.